Welcome back to another episode of The Road to Building Intelligent Data Apps. My name is Savannah Peterson here from theCUBE, joined by analyst George Gilbert. And today we are going to be talking about a very hot topic that's been kicking off the year. We're going to be talking about agents. However, we're going to be digging into the semantic layer, and I cannot wait to kick this off with the perfect person to do so. Nate, thank you so much for taking the time to join us from Tableau. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Savannah and George. It's great to be here.
Good to see you, Nate. Okay.
So everyone is talking about agents and agents being able to use agents, not to be meta about it, but considering where a lot of this activity happens. This is a revolution in the way that we work, but it's also a huge challenge when it comes to the massive amount of data that companies already have, as well as the exponential amount of data coming in from new sources as a result of AI. You are one of the people in charge of developing products around these very complex challenges, and a lot of that comes in the semantic layer. Give us a little bit of a lay of the land from a high level of the big challenges in the analytics world and why what you're doing with the team is so important in solving that problem.
Yeah, so so at Tableau, our mission has always been to help everyone see and understand data, and that's what we've been going for. But actually, getting to everyone has been a really hard problem. We've been pushing on that for 20 years. We've made inroads there. There's a lot of other work going on in the space, and that's all been great. But it's been really hard to do that last mile. And for us, it's how do we connect to the typically 70% of an organization that doesn't have data and analytics in their title. They want to be data-driven. Their managers want them to be data-driven. They want to be doing a good job. But in practice, it's really hard to actually get meaning and insights and actions from data. And that's always been super hard. And we've done our best, and other people have as well. But really, just the technology sort of hasn't been there. We've been limited to visualizations. We've been limited to dashboards, that kind of approach. And that's the best we could do for a long time. Obviously, AI has changed everything in the last few years. I've been in this space a long time. It's all happening way more quickly than I thought it would, and it seems like no sign of slowing down. And the really exciting thing for us at Tableau is two things. One is now with generative AI, we can actually use natural language to answer questions and to explain to people what's going on and to surface insights that are really useful. And we're really excited to do that for business users and the people, again, that are, sort of have day jobs in sales, marketing, product management, customer success, whatever that is. We can do that for them. But also, really importantly, to your point, Savannah, we can do it for agents too. And we can start to think about how do we provide an analyst for all of the agents that are going to be running around. And I saw last week, I think Accenture published a study that by 2030, agents will be the primary users of enterprise software, which is crazy, right? That's 7 years after ChatGPT came out, now the primary user of all this software is agents. And so in that world, being able to deliver capabilities and analytics insights and recommended actions and triggered alerts and all those things for agents is critical. The challenge then is like, cool, we've got all the AI, that's awesome. We've got a whole bunch of data, that's great. And how do we connect them? And how do we help the AI go from, here's a question in natural language using business jargon that's specific to a customer, that needs to ground out in SQL queries across a lot of different tables, SQL queries you can trust, post-query analytics we can run. And going from what a human says to the data has been a really hard problem. And it's not just AI is going to be so smart you don't need any of that anymore. You need a place where the customer can say, this is what synonyms mean to us. This is how we look at things at the end of the quarter. When we're evaluating our salespeople, these are the metrics we're looking at. Those aren't just, we need a super smart AI to come up with that. We need the customer to tell us that, right? And we can help them do that. And maybe we'll talk about how AI can help. But the answer is specific to every customer. And so we need a place to store that information, to rationalize that information, to vend it to humans and to all the agents. And that's really what the semantic layer is doing. It's that translation point. It's that kind of waypoint, that middle ground between how business users and leaders in your company think about data and how a database thinks about data.
Would it be fair to say, Nate, that this is a common language that both humans and agents can collaborate and communicate in, and
Yeah.
that the agents can't speak SQL reliably. They need something like, these are based on language models. They need something semantically more coherent, semantically higher level. And that's what this semantic layer is. So in other words, the interface point between the agents and the data isn't SQL. It's this semantic layer. If I just to recap what you said.
Yeah, exactly. The kind of the maybe slightly silly metaphor in my mind is like if you think of data as like a farm, the user is somebody who's trying to cook a meal, and the semantic layer is the grocery store, right? Like you don't, if you're trying to make vegetable soup, you don't go out into a field and start pulling carrots out of the ground because you're probably not very good at picking carrots, and it's really hard, and there's only carrots that are only in season in some parts of the world, and you should know that. Don't go to that farm because it's right next to the sewage plant or whatever. You don't want it. You go to the grocery store where everything has been certified, where things are priced and labeled, and they've been inspected, and they've got a bunch of options, and you can pick up 4 vegetables at once without needing to go to 4 different farms. And so bringing that together is such a it's great for the users. It's also great just to try to generate those. Like it's much easier for the agent to do a good job specifying what it needs semantically, to your point, George, and not trying to have the agent generate a 50-line SQL query. Like language models are really good at they're amazingly good at generating SQL queries, but you need to be like 100% at generating SQL queries, right? And that's like, it's just too hard. There's too many ways for that to go wrong. It gets harder the more kind of, the bigger your data is, the more likely it is to fail. We've got this nice layer where the agent can say, here's the fields I need to answer this question. And then deterministically, we can translate that to, oh, there's going to be a bunch of SQL, but the agent doesn't have to do that work. It can do the simpler task of, here's the information I need to answer the user's question. Here's other things I want to look at. And then we can have code say, okay, under the covers, that's going to actually, bottom out in 10 different join tables and whatever else. But we can take that load off the agent, which helps with, quality and accuracy and verification and all those things.
So,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, should we take a look at an example? Should we take viewers through the example we have first, and then you explain like what it means, Savannah? Maybe you can help us interpret.
Yeah, I think one thing I do want to ask before we slide into that conversation, but it's a parlay there, is when I can imagine, I mean, you're on the product side, so it's a good question to ask you. I imagine when you're designing and building this, you're communicating with a lot of different customers to help guide that development. And also, given that you're probably talking to a lot of different customer verticals and industries, what was that research process like that got us to what you're about to show us now?
Yeah, so one of the nice things about being at Salesforce is we have access to all these different industries, and we also know a lot about sales and service and marketing and customer success and commerce and all these different areas. And so what we've been able to do is work with our clouds, work with partners with them, and say, okay, and what we're doing is building a lot of this work already. And so we're saying, hey, we're developing a great semantic model that we use internally for our sales teams. It's probably not going to be exactly the semantic model that a sales team and a customer of ours wants, but it's probably pretty close. They're going to be looking at deal velocity. They're going to be looking at coverage. They're going to be looking at pipelines. There's a lot of these things where on the margins, you need tweaks for every different customer, but there's a lot of work that can be very standardized. And so what I've been able to do is work with all the clouds and other partners within Salesforce and say, what are the questions you're typically asking? What are the models that, the pieces of information that people are looking at on a regular basis? How does that change by industry? And there are some places it changes and some places it doesn't. And so we're able to leverage all that, domain expertise from the Salesforce side. And from the Tableau side, we've got 20 years of analytical expertise around how to do best practice visualizations, how to do really scalable, queries for performance, how to federate across different data sources. And so we've been able to take everything we know from the domain specifics, as well as the analytical expertise we've been developing at Tableau. And one of the things that I like working about Tableau is nobody cares about the analytics as much as we do. There's a lot of people that have analytics products sort of as a loss leader because they really want you to get onto their data platform or different things. We really believe in the power of analytics, and that's something we care deeply about. and we have for 20 years. And so bringing that in, but also now being able to put that, to scale that across all the different industries and verticals, across all the different agents, across the Salesforce customer base is super exciting to take that rigor and sort of get to apply it more broadly.
That's awesome. I can imagine that is. All right, George, I'll let you introduce what we're about to see next.
So this is a storyboard, not live, but we're going to do some screenshots, Nate, that Nate has shared with us, that takes us through the user experience of the new Tableau. So let's put this up on the screen here. Okay, so Nate, why don't you start taking us through the story that what's going on here, so we can make concrete what this technology is enabling.
Yeah, so a couple things to kind of shout out before we get into it. One is I'm showing this in Slack. Obviously, Slack is a part of Salesforce as well. We're doing a bunch of awesome stuff with Slack. We're really excited about that. But this is not at all a Slack-only experience. We're also building a Teams app. This is also can be embedded really kind of anywhere in Workday, a lot of different places. So we're excited about Slack, but this isn't the only place it can live. And what I'll be showing here is we'll be talking about how the semantic layer is powering this, but also this idea of the analytics agent that we introduced earlier that's sitting on top of the semantic layer and really leveraging that to do its work. So in this story, we have Carmen Vega, who is a sales leader. She's coming in at the end of the quarter. She's got an end of quarter meeting with her leaders, and she wants to come in equipped for that. And so you can see a little bit previous conversations with the agent, but Carmen just opens it up and asks a pretty ambiguous high-level question of help me analyze velocity this quarter and break down the problem areas. Okay. And so what's going on there, and you'll see there's an concierge call out on the left. If you go down to the next one, sorry. All right. There's a couple different kind of modalities the agent has that you'll see in here. One is concierge, which is this idea of it's an on-demand analyst. If you have an ad hoc data question, could be because you're looking at a dashboard and you want to go deeper. It could be because you're in Slack and prepping for a meeting. It could be you're riffing around a whiteboard and want to fire off a question, or in a Google Meet or a Slack huddle, whatever. This idea of concierge is you can fire off a question and you get back an answer that you trust and brings back rich objects like we'll show here. And so you can see in this the answer is talking about velocity looking pretty good at 68%, breaks it down by the different segments. And so we're looking at HLS and some other ones. And one of the things that's really nice here is a couple things. One is velocity is there can be a lot of different velocities, and it's not clear what that means across intuitively, we have some sense of it, but we have to go beyond intuition. This has to actually cache out in queries here. But the semantic layer is storing information like, hey, how do we calculate velocity? And what are maybe other synonyms for velocity? So if you call it something else, you'll still get the right answer. And so here we're asking this question. We also asked it to break down problem areas. I think we'll talk about this a little bit more, but part of what we're storing in the semantic layer is this idea of metrics. And so it's really powerful because you can associate things with velocity, like velocity, with here's the different dimensions this can be usefully broken down by. It can be broken down by industry. It can be broken down by customer segment. It can be broken down by maybe which team or which region it's on. And so when we ask, and that's all stored in the semantic layer and verified, and people can look at that. And so when we ask it to break down the problem areas, it's not scanning every column in the data and running huge amounts of offline analysis and trying to look for needle in the haystack things. And it turns out that a lot of macaroni and cheese was bought in Minnesota last Tuesday, and maybe that's what's doing it or whatever. It's not trying to do that. It's trying to think like the people in your org think, and they're looking for problem areas along a couple different dimensions, right? And in this case, and this is part of, again, to our expertise in analytics, we know that averages can hide a lot of sins, right? And so in this case, the average is doing really well. That's great. We've got checks in the prompt for the agent to say, hey, when the average is okay, actually look at the underlying inputs to that average, because it may be really unbalanced. And in this case, that's what it's doing. And we see that RCG is really behind. So the average is doing okay, but retail consumer goods is falling behind.
So let me just clarify, Nate. The idea is that you've set up the metric and dimensions as set of definitions. This is the data. We talked about how it makes it easier than going straight to SQL, but having an agent there says the user can ask a question, the agent can interpret that as the user's intent. And then the metric and dimensions are really, it's almost like guardrails around the context for interpreting and answering the question behind that intent. Is that a fair way of characterizing it?
Yeah, yes, I think so. And there's been a lot of, particularly when ChatGPT 3.5 or 4 came out, there was a lot of emphasis on like this, like NL to SQL. Like you can type in a question in natural language and there's a SQL statement comes out. And there were like huge advances in that. Like large language models are surprisingly good at that. And that's okay when you have a question that is basically a SQL statement. But business users in particular, they have harder questions that can be answered with a select and an aggregation. They have questions like break down problem areas, and that's like really open-ended. So we want to have this kind of mix of allow business users to not specify, analyze along these 8 dimensions and tell me if there were any outliers in there, because that's not what a business user wants to be doing. In a lot of cases, the analyst knows what those dimensions are. And so we're finding this middle ground where the business user can ask not naive questions, but sort of open-ended, ambiguous questions like they would ask an analyst. But we have that semantic layer that says, okay, I'm going to your point, George, I'm going to take that intent and I'm going to try to satisfy that intent using what I know about the actual semantics that have been configured and stored in the semantic model.
Okay. All right. Should we move to the next?
Yeah. So here there's, there was an issue with RCGO. Actually, this is showing some of again, because this is all backed by a consistent model, the things that come back it's not just a JPEG of a chart that comes back, it's a real object. And so these are like rich interactive objects. And so you can like click and explore that viz. If you go to the next, I think the next couple images are things you can do with that viz right there in Slack. This is one of the, Tableau has had semantics in our product for a while, but a lot of those have been kind of at they've been locked away inside the dashboard or inside the workbook, where they're serving visualizations, but you don't sort of get any leverage out of that. They're kind of only at the very end. The kind of leaf node is where those semantics are applied. And so now if somebody else wants to go do a similar dashboard, they have to get the same filters set up correctly or the same aggregation. This is more centrally defined. And so it means that we can, expose similar interactions with whether you're in Slack or you're in our UI or you're in Salesforce UI somewhere. These are all the same objects that are being used and leveraged so that you can interact with them right in Slack. I think the next screen is showing that we can pull together different conversations from across Slack, all the different places where that you have access to, that people are talking about this metric. And so we're really trying to center the conversation around these semantic models, be able to pull in all the work that's happening and use them almost sort of as like the axle of the wheel, or like the center of that axis. And it's no longer, there's a whole bunch of dashboards with this kind of semantic sprawl, and some of them have slightly different definitions of revenue, and one of them has a week that starts on Monday and another one has a week that starts on Sunday. And it's this whole kind of thing that's hard to get your arms around. We're pulling that together and saying, hey, from this object, this metric here, we can show you all the conversations that are happening off of that. We can show you visualizations that you can, change the time frame on or add filters to. And again, we can do all of that work because it's stored in a central semantic layer. And
so you made this great analogy there, where it's this axle. So instead of it used to live like in someone's workbook, and now it lives in a shared space. And so there can be conversation in Slack, and the analytic artifact can live in Slack. It can live in other applications. And I guess the conversation is attached to this object. Can the conversation be shared beyond Slack?
Yeah, for sure. And we actually there's a really cool capability coming where the same Slack conversation shows up in the web interface. And if you're commenting in the web interface, that's also being relayed to Slack. So wherever you're having that conversation, it's the same conversation. You have all that context. And I think you got me thinking, George, on the first part of that, where we've had this I think we're kind of flipping the model here, in particular with semantics and visualization, where before, and traditionally in Tableau and in BI, you start by thinking, okay, I'm an analyst. I have a customer. One of my internal customers is asking for a funnel chart to track, what our sales funnel is. And so I'm going to build that out. And I know we've got 6 dimensions, and I'm going to lay those out, and I'm going to do the configuration in Tableau to generate that visualization. And you're starting with, I want to create a viz. And now what do I kind of need to wire in to get that viz? You wire some stuff together. And again, it's really, it's subordinate to the visualization and kind of like locked away there. And if somebody wants a similar funnel chart somewhere else, they're going to go through the same steps. They're going to drag out the 6 dimensions. For each stage in the opportunity, they're going to do that work. And you start with wanting a visualization, and then you kind of create these almost implicit or sort of localized semantics to power that. The approach we're doing now is much more around, you should define in the semantic layer what your sales funnel looks like. What are the dimensions? What's the order of stages? Define that once in the semantic layer, and then we can create a lot of different visualizations off of that. Creating visualizations off of a rich semantic model is really straightforward. Like, we can see, like, this visualization here, it was not created by a person, it was created by an AI looking at a metric and knowing how to do this. And so here we're shifting towards prioritizing the semantic models, prioritizing the semantic layer, and then a lot of the visualizations you can get, or the agent capabilities, or answering questions, are all kind of natural follow-ons to having that semantic model pulled together in the first place.
Okay, I got to ask a really geeky question that it just seems relevant right now. This is maybe I was hoping to save this to save the super geeky stuff to the end, but there's this, the original technology behind the graphical user interface was developed at Xerox PARC, and they had this architecture called model view controller, separating out the data model, or the conceptual model. The view was the user interface. Controller were the widgets to manipulate the model. And if I'm understanding, is that the semantic model is like that model, and because you've put it now, separated it out, put it in the server, it makes it easier for multiple users. Now, this is, back then we were just talking about a single user interacting with an application. Now multiple users can interact with that data model. Is that a fair way of saying that?
Yes, multiple users that are both human and agents.
Agent.
And they're all seeing the same, number. Like, it kills me when, and this happens sometimes internally too, as we're still developing this and not quite there yet, but like, you get a screenshot of a visualization or a dashboard, and you're like, man, these numbers, like, they don't feel right, but I don't know where they came from, and I don't know if I trust that dashboard. And it's such a, that uncertainty just reduces adoption so much, because it's like, well, forget it. If I don't know if I can trust her, if I don't know I'm looking at the same number my boss is looking at or the CEO is looking at, then like, it's easy to kind of just throw up your hands. And so by centralizing this and putting this in one place, sometimes you have forced kind of tough internal conversations when you want to get, like, lots of times teams like their own different dashboards because this one makes them look really good and this other one doesn't make them look as good. And you can have kind of internal, debate and conversations around how are we actually going to calculate this number going forward. But those are really important, valuable conversations to have. And internally, we're feeling the power that comes from everybody being aligned to the same number and everybody rolling up to the same, to the same metric or to the same, model, whatever that is. It's really powerful and it's really unifying, and it helps streamline a lot of conversations internally. And there's just a lot of trying to track things down and, old Slack threads and all this kind of work that goes away when everybody's singing from the same songbook. And again, that's, people singing today, and increasingly it's going to be agents who are both consuming the semantic layer, but also helping curate and govern it and making it easier for people to manage. Always with the humans are always going to be in control. That, the analysts and the data curators are the ones that are accountable for the data, being accurate and the definitions being correct. But the AI can help a lot on taking those first passes of things and make actually, building those semantic models and maintaining them a lot less painful than it's been historically.
Oh, okay. So, well, I was thinking we might get to that sort of towards the end, but maybe that's a good place to tee up a conversation of how the agent is not just like a proxy for another user to help you ask questions, but it's actually can help you build the semantic model. Maybe you can explain that a bit.
Yeah, if we just go like 2 more slides in the story, we'll see one
Okay.
way that can come to life. So here, Carmen saw the answer about retail RCG, asking some follow-up questions if they've hit their commit or if they've changed their commit, which hasn't happened in this case. And then the agent here is also, again, doing some more of that dimensional exploration and saying, hey, in particular, there's a lot of big deals open in Pacific Northwest. Those are really where the opportunities are for retail and consumer goods hitting their number. And then Carmen easily brings in Harry Boone, who owns RCG in Pacific Northwest. And if you go down just one more.
Okay.
Now what was a conversation with just the agent. We've brought in Harry, who has all the same context, sees the same numbers, sees exactly where Carmen is coming from, and says, hey, he's running this closed confident sales program that he thinks is going to help get the deals over the line. And then Carmen says, okay, cool, let me know how it goes. And so that is like sort of one interaction, the kind of thing that'd be easy to miss and get embarrassed coming into a meeting, a kind of thing that, if you're the CEO and you have analysts on call, you could tell them to go do this work. Most of us don't have our own analysts to get this kind of work done. Here we're able to provide those capabilities for everybody. And this was a nice interaction. And then we can see, if you go to the next slide, I think there's like a interstitial where it's 5 minutes later.
Okay.
And then this is where we see one place, we're calling it semantic enrichment. But you can see how the semantic layer improves. And so what's happening here is the agent in this other, I mentioned the concierge mode, which is that reactive ad hoc questions. The other side of that coin is a set of capabilities we're calling inspector, which is much more proactive. And really the goal here, the thing that I really want for our users to feel is, hey, I think we all have kind of, numbers or projects that just take up 3 to 5% of our brain at all times is worried about whether we're on track to hit this thing, or whether we're going to get engagement numbers above this, or whether we're going to hit our number at the end of the quarter. And it's just this kind of drag on life, right? Because it's just taking up headspace. What we really want to do is say, you don't have to come in every morning and look at a dashboard. You also don't have to come in every morning and ask the agent the same question of, hey, have we hit our number yet? Like, asking that every morning is ridiculous, right? So what we want to do is say, hey, you tell the agent what's important to you, and it will watch those things for you. It'll hang out autonomously. It'll run every 6 hours or on data refresh or at midnight, whatever that is. It's going to look for things that will be important to you, and then reach out to you proactively when those things are coming up, when there's something that you should be aware of. And so what it's doing here is it says, hey, we just went through this interaction. You had some questions. We grabbed Harry Boone. I know it's near the end of the quarter. Is this the thing you want me to do like regularly for you? I can sort of rerun that same playbook. Here you can see it sort of got the playbook wrong because it said, oh, I'm going to dig into Pacific Northwest every time. And then Carmen corrects it. And it's like, no, it's not that. It's not that I want to look at Pacific Northwest at the end of every quarter. It's that I want to look at any problem areas. And it says, okay. And then about halfway down the screen, Carmen mentions that she wants the agent to call out any risks on big deals. And the agent's happy to do that, but it doesn't know what a risky big deal is, right? That's not something it has stored in its semantic model. Historically, it would say, I don't know how to do that. And then Carmen would be annoyed and she would go ask one of her analysts to go into some UX somewhere and define a new customer or deal category named risky big deals. And he has 15 minutes back and forth with the analyst to say, what does it mean for it to be a risky big deal? And now that's going to be updated. And now a week later, if Carmen remembers, this question will work. That's the old flow. The new flow we're able to do is right here in the exact same context of the conversation. The agent says, cool, like, what do you mean by risky big deals? You see that Carmen says, any deal that's greater than 500K and it's been the same stage for more than a month. And that's not her trying to figure out what the conditional language is or how to do, choosing greater than, less than from little drop downs. It's her talking as a sales leader. And the agent says, cool, I know how to go convert from that to the actual, piece of JSON that's going to be configuring this. So it does that work. And now in the semantic layer, there is a new definition about what a risky big deal is. And we also have some governance in this. And so customers have some flexibility where at the first, the customers say, this is great, but only Carmen should have access to this. This idea of a risky big deal it's not been blessed by the company. The analytics team may have input on like, well, that's not really a big deal, or maybe that should be to really make this scale, that should be tied to above the 50% median for above 80% median for deal size. Like they may have some kind of richer answer for that. But so this definition can stay scoped to Carmen, and she can talk about risky big deals, and the agent will know what she's talking about. Or an analyst could say, I'm going to promote this, and say, and and the agent will reach out to them and put it into a queue that says, hey, I was having this conversation with Carmen. This was helpful for her. If this definition is good, click this accept button, and now we're going to promote it from being specific to Carmen back into the semantic layer more broadly for the organization. And so now anybody can ask about risky big deals, and they'll be using, it's not sort of an intuition, it's not whatever the agent, when it was executing that particular query, thought counted as a big deal, and that can change. It's, hey, there is a right way for calculating risky big deals in this company, and this is what it is. But actually creating this was a 20-second interaction with a sales leader, not a work item that got put on an analyst tasks and took 2 weeks to get done.
But I want to call this out, Savannah, before you jump in. I just want to call out, there's a bigger lesson here, which is there might be upfront work defining this data model or semantic model for interaction by users and agents, but then there's the ongoing interaction with the model extends the model. And I want to throw out what I think the characteristics of when you would extend it are. When you want repeatability, precision, performance, explainability. In other words, when you want to drop something out of the realm of the non-deterministic LLM-based agent and back into the world of procedural code. I mean, you're still going to use it with an agent, but there are some characteristics where you really want to take it out of the agent's hands and make it more, again, repeatable, precise, performant, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's one of the big differences between like how we think about these kind of tasks and what people get if you use Code Interpreter on ChatGPT, or Claude and Anthropic have a lot of these capabilities. They're awesome. Like you upload a CSV and ask some questions and it does really good stuff. And like I use it for some of my personal data. It's great. And it will take a swing at what a big deal is. And today it might say any deal bigger than 50K. And then tomorrow it might say any deal bigger than 75K. And the next day it's any deal bigger than 40K. Because it'll always be some reasonable guess, but there's nothing to enforce consistency, repeatability, all those things that you said. And so when we think about how do we take those capabilities that are great in our consumer lives and are sufficiently rigorous if you're trying to analyze your run data or these kinds of like day-to-day analytics things that we might be doing at home, it's sufficient for that. When you get to enterprise, like all of that, you need all of those things, right? You don't want to be just grabbing CSVs or having the agent say, here's what I think a big deal is today. You want that to be much more rigorous, much more repeated, much more, and there was an analyst that was okay with this. And then you have to bring in things like the semantic layer to actually deliver those kinds of capabilities at enterprise scale.
Okay. Shall we keep going on the storyboard?
Yeah, sure. So this is, the semantic enrichment happening. And you're totally right, George. Like I think of internally as like paving the cow paths, where you kind of see where the cows go, and that's where you put the sidewalks. And it's a similar thing where you look at you don't need to boil the ocean and just, have an 18-month semantic modeling project that you kick off. You get the seed there. And then as people start asking questions, you focus in those areas, and itself kind of focuses in those areas, and it becomes much more richer in the places that people are actually using, and you don't have to do it all up front.
I think just the sidebar is this is going to happen far beyond business intelligence. This is going to happen in the broader semantics that are harmonizing the data and application estate for agents, well beyond analytics.
Yeah, and that's really, I'm glad you brought that up, George. It's super important. Like, so we're, I'm with Tableau. I love analytics. We're using the semantic layer, but the semantic layer we're talking about is across all of Salesforce, right? So every marketing, sales, service cloud, every cloud is going to be consuming from the same interface, which means that every cloud is writing back additional context to it, which means we can build apps that are really great for sales and have a lot of semantic additional modeling built right into it. And so you're totally right. It's amazing and a huge lift for us on the analytics team, but it's much broader than that, and will really it's growing to serve all of Salesforce.
Okay. All right. So tell us what we're looking
Yeah,
at.
so this is the inspector. In the previous screen, Carmen said, "Yeah, send me this kind of thing before the beginning of every quarter." Here, it's reaching out. It's the next quarter, and reaching out. She's going to have the same. She has the same meeting coming up. And in this case, it knows the analysis it did before, so it can kind of rerun that same analytical playbook. And it's saying, in this case, RCG is still struggling, but now it's in Texas, not in the Pacific Northwest. So the actual kind of like location of that has been different. But one of the things you see is really nice here is it looks like the closed confident program was successful in a similar situation last quarter. So if you remember, the manager of Pacific Northwest, RCG, said, "Hey, I'm running this program and it's going to help." It did help. And now the system is able to say, "Hey," and again, this all gets way easier now that everything is based on natural language and large language models are really good at it, is we can store those things as cases that, successful cases. And then we can basically rag those kinds of things in. And so the agent is saying, "Hey, I know I've seen this situation before. And I also know from the data what was the thing that worked." And so now it's not just saying, "Hey," similar to last month or last quarter, have a conversation with a new manager. It's saying, based on what we learned and was successful, how do we apply that going forward? And so the recommendation that's coming out is, hey, maybe this closed confident program would also be useful here. And the thing that gets really powerful with this is best practices and things that work start becoming really scalable. And we can start to say, "Hey, there's a salesperson who's has a lot of experience or a lot of skills. They closed a similar deal. Here's what they did. Here's the playbook they ran." And again, all of that becomes we store that in the semantic layer, and it becomes a lot easier to manage now that large language models are so good with language. Before, that would have been some horrible clunky interface that would be this kind of painful thing to consume. Now we can just put it right there in the language. "Hey, do you want to run this program again?" And we can carry that through. And so now kind of the idea we want to get to is help everybody be as good as your best person, and help that institutional knowledge that's today locked away in so many people's heads, your best salespeople's heads, your best analyst heads. They know a ton that is not represented anywhere, which means it's harder for their coworkers to benefit from it, and it's hard and impossible for agents to benefit from it. And so a lot of what we're doing in the semantic layer is giving a space for all that institutional knowledge and intuition and scars that have been built up by the people on your team. How do we get that out of their heads and get that into the semantic layer where you can manage it and govern it, and we can serve all of the agents from that? And now you get scale from the agents, but it's not just general purpose scale. It's agents that know a lot about how your org functions and how your teams have been successful in the past, and can apply that going forward.
So there's one thing here, Sven, and then you jump in. There's one thing I want to ask, which is kind of a different perspective, which is you've got this full stack from the data cloud, the semantic layer, the analytics, the operational applications, Tableau itself as a user experience. But how should customers who also have like Databricks and Snowflake, which are sort of building out their own semantic models, analytic semantic models, to be clear, how should they think about coexistence, interoperability, and the idea of who's supposed to own the semantic definition of the data? Is it the data platform? I know Salesforce is a different kind of animal because you've got this, full, stack, but what about the other data platforms?
So it's super good questions, and I talk a lot with customers about this who have very similar questions. So there's, I think, two things that are really important to call out. One is when we say data cloud, a lot of people hear data cloud and they think of it as, there's Snowflake, there's Databricks, and there's data cloud, and they're all kind of like similar things. And that is not the case. So data cloud can work as the Snowflake or as the Databricks and hold on to all your data. but it also works as a more of a data orchestration layer. And so a lot of our customers have really mature installs on Snowflake or Databricks or Redshift, wherever. All of that can flow through Data Cloud without being transferred into Data Cloud, without being stored on Salesforce. So we're super happy for customers that already have data lakehouses they're happy with. Great, leave the data there. Data Cloud is going to help orchestrate that. We can do some nice things, but we do a lot of work with like query pushdowns. We've partnered. We've got like real, hardcore engineers on our team working with hardcore engineers on Databricks and Snowflakes and others. This idea of zero copy data, and so it sort of flows through. It flows through Data Cloud, but it's at rest. It's always in Snowflake, and that can remain the source of truth for a particular customer if they're happy with what they've got there.
So just to be clear, then that interaction with the agent where it says, okay, do we want to create a real definition for this, a repeatable, performant, precise, explainable, expanded semantic model can refer to data at rest that's normally at rest in Snowflake and Databricks, and that it's just brought in, sort of at query time, like it's maybe cached, but it's brought in for the query into Data Cloud.
Yes.
And it's stored, it's persisted in the other data platforms.
Yes, exactly. So we're in mechanically, there's sort of like a shadow table that gets created in Data Cloud that refers to the real table in Snowflake or wherever, but there's no data in that. It's just sort of a metadata definition of the table. And so the semantic layer is happy to let you define a bunch of metrics and synonyms and business terms and glossary and all that kind of stuff against data that's in Snowflake or Databricks or other places. So that's one thing that's important for people to understand about Data Cloud. On the semantic layer side, there's other people that are doing semantic layers, like you said. Some of them are sort of the data players moving up the stack and adding semantics on top. There's also things like DBT and Atlan and others in the spot that are kind of more semantic layer vendors. One of the things we're exploring, and we don't have anything to announce on it today, but we're doing POCs around, is this idea, at least for now, at least we're calling it zero copy semantics. And so the idea was, hey, we've got a semantic layer, but we're I don't know quite how specific it can be. We're doing POCs with people you've heard of in this space to say, how can a customer define their semantic models in some other thing like DBT or a data catalog? They can define a lot of that there. And it's vended through our semantic layer. So, we get to build on top of a single set of APIs, but maybe our semantic layer is sort of similar to Data Cloud, is not really the source of truth for that semantics. That can stay in whatever the customers have today. And also we're looking at how can we take existing Tableau published data sources that users have created. Lots of times they've invested in those data sources. They've put a lot of curation and semantics into that. We would love our semantic layer to really extend and encompass that as well. And so now you could have a data source that's running in Tableau Cloud, a published data source that's powering visualizations in Tableau today. As we, over the course of this year, we're going to be releasing the new Tableau that's running on Agentforce, that's built on the semantic layer, and being able to provide and power these capabilities like you're seeing here against your existing published data sources, which are maybe have on-prem data that's on in a server in your basement somewhere. That's also something we're exploring, and I think there'll be good things to announce there soon. But it's early days.
I just want to make sure I understood that, and there's an implementation question. But so if I understood correctly, this was the one part where I wasn't 100% clear. There's an ability perhaps to map to other semantic layer definitions like DBT, like perhaps Databricks and Snowflake as they mature, because like metric and dimension definitions are metric and dimension definitions, and so just the way you're mapping data now, you might be able to map semantic models. But
yes.
Just one implementation question: when you're bringing in via shadow tables, data that's stored elsewhere, what's the performance overhead for that sort of thing?
Yeah, on the Data Cloud side, it's a negligible performance hit because of one, we've got like the Hyper engine running from Tableau that's been optimized over the last 10 years by our Brainiac team that does that work. But we're also doing a lot of work on how can we push down queries as much as possible. So if you're issuing a query that, and it gets into these variants of Snowflake SQL is a slightly different variant than Databricks SQL. And in Databricks, you can do a median and push that down to the database, and Snowflake you can't, or vice versa. And so we're doing a lot of work on our end within Data Cloud to, as much as possible, we're not touching the queries that are coming in. We're proxying those through right to the underlying data source when we can. If we can't, then we pull in a little bit and calculate the median in memory or something. But a lot of that can end up being pass-throughs that are still really performant.
Okay, Savannah, I cut you off like 5 minutes ago, but
it's all good. No, I was just going to comment that a lot of solutions and companies talk about trying to get data out of silos, but the way that translates is usually not quite as smooth as it needs to be for real knowledge exchange. And it's great to see how this could learn from different people across the company at the same time to optimize the awareness of whatever real time, or even not real time, but relevant data there is for everyone. It's an interesting way of collaborating without someone saying, hey, this is everything I know in terms of my institutional knowledge. You need to digest it, versus saying, hey, this is the data I've been using, or this is how we make these decisions. I can just see a lot of different use cases where it's really helpful to have that visibility. So anyway, I am mindful a little bit of our time here, George.
Right.
So let's go ahead and let Nate continue taking us down this wonderful path.
Yeah. Okay.
So just briefly here, Carmen tags in Susan, who's the manager of the Texas that's struggling, along with Harry Boone, who was kind of turned it around last quarter. And just one of the nice things here is that Agent Force itself is also in the conversation. And so when Carmen asks the question about, hey, did this particular sales promotion, did it lower average deal size at all? Those questions tend to either get unanswered today, and people are like, yeah, that'd be interesting to know, but nobody wants to spend the 30 minutes to go actually dig that up. Hey, the agent's hanging out, and it's going to jump in, and we're not going to have it, bomb into some private conversation you're having. But the idea of just being able to, almost like a virtual teammate, and being able to, hey, we're gonna have a Google Meet, or we're gonna have a Slack huddle, or we're gonna have a Zoom call. Let's bring the agent in here, and we can fire questions at it, or it can kind of hang out and listen for places where it might be useful. Like, a big part of what we want to do is make sure it's really in the flow of work with you, and it's not I should go ask the agent a question, and so now I'm going to go sign into tableau.com and plus new question and type it out. Like, we don't want it to feel like this heavy experience. We want it to be, as you're riffing, as the question crosses your mind, those are really super easy to get answered and keep you in the zone, or keep you in the conversation, while also giving you the analytical insights to help you make better decisions and take better actions.
All right. So my one comment then, before Savannah, maybe I don't know if we're almost at time, but my one observation is you've created an environment where it's not just, Slack was people collaborating. Now that's people collaborating with each other and with agents. And the byproduct of the collaboration is, as you were saying, to help pave, the cow path, so that those collaborations in the future can be more repeatable, precise, performant, explainable, that they don't have to go through an LLM, which is, they don't have to go through an agent where you lose reliability. Like the things that need to be repeatable, like in a business, you create processes. Now the processes are defined in data, in the data model.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We're trying to push that uncertainty, and we're trying to push it out of the flow of answering a question, and say, how much of this can we, or either we have to do this implicitly once, but then we're going to write it down, and that's going to be a thing that we can rally around, instead of just, sort of reinventing the wheel every time. And this is just the final thing, where now it's next quarter and everything is going up and to the right like you want it to be, and everybody's on track to hit their numbers, because of Carmen's leadership and the work that the people are doing, but also because the agent was really helpful in focusing the team on the right opportunities.
All right, Nate, that was an amazing walkthrough. So thank you for preparing that for us. Yeah,
thanks. It's fun. It's fun to show. I hope my genuine enthusiasm for it comes across, because I'm really excited. And I think, at the start of, we're near the start of 2025 now. This year feels kind of like going on a roller coaster, and when the tick 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 slows when you get to the top, and the the fun times are about to kick off. That feels like the moment we're in right now. So I'm super excited. Tableau conference here in April. We'll let customers go hands-on with this. A lot of this will start being released over the summer, and we're super eager to let people get their hands on it.
Just one last question on now. This is a marketing, a go-to-market or TAM question, but it seems now like this is Tableau and the agent to help you interact with data is something that every user in an organization is going to need. Like, how does that change compared to now?
Yeah, that's like absolutely the goal. And we haven't announced pricing yet, so I can't get into sort of details there. But really, what we want to have happen is 100% of users within an org have access to this. They're asking questions of it. Everybody is getting value out of this, and that we've got a lot of customers today where every customer has a Tableau license, and that's great. We love those customers, and a lot of them have led really powerful digital and data transformations. But it's so much work, and there's so many people that have accounts. They have a login, but they don't use it very often, or they use it every once in a while right before the end of the quarter, or they have. And I'm guilty of this too. It's like the to-do that gets kicked to tomorrow for weeks at a time when I know I should be looking at some of these things, but it's just a hard process, right? And it's not a very fun process. And if you see something interesting, it's hard to know what to do about it in a lot of cases. And so, yeah, we really, when we think about, again, back to our vision of helping everyone see and understand data, like we take that everyone seriously. And so we really want both within, Tableau customers we've had for a long time, but also if we look to Salesforce customers, there's tons of them that don't have any analytic solution or haven't ever used one of our analytic solutions. And everything you're seeing here can just be embedded right in Sales Cloud or on an account page or anywhere that Salesforce is embedded today. And so I think we're going to have a lot of users that use Tableau on a regular basis, on a daily basis, but never hear the word Tableau. They don't care about Tableau. They don't go to trainings and have 2-week certifications on Tableau. They just know they're a sales rep. They're trying to do a good job, and there's this box they can ask questions to, and sometimes the box reaches out to them proactively when it's something they should care about. And it's a force multiplier for them. It's helping everybody do a better job, be more productive at their job without kind of cramming analytics and dashboard and Tableau down their throat. It's really, focus on the place where you're doing work, and how can we ensure that analytics are everywhere, that analytics are ambient across all these different experiences, and they're in the flow of work. It's not a separate thing you have to go do. It's do your job, and your job will be easier and better and more enjoyable because of where we can put the insights and these capabilities.
All right, that was we should stop it there because we're a little over. But Nate, that was an amazing walkthrough.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was great. It's all about meeting not just the customers where they are, but the questions where they are is what I took away from that. And
yeah, I like that framing.
Yeah, and I gotta just give you credit, Nate. You did a great job with the analogies, everything from mac and cheese to carrots to quite a plethora of descriptors here. So thank you for sharing all of your insights and for all the prep time I know that went into this, both of you, George and Nate as well. Yeah. It's a great and very relevant conversation. Obviously going to be a very exciting year for you and the Tableau team. I can't wait to see how it all pans out and how your customers start using it. George, thank you for all the wonderful insights and great questions as always.
Savannah, thanks for holding us together, and I look forward to the next one.
Me too. It's a joy to get to learn from some of the smartest people on earth. And thank all of you for tuning in wherever you might be hanging out with us today. We are delighted to present this series on the road to intelligent data apps. My name is Savannah Peterson. You're watching theCUBE, the leading source for enterprise tech news.